right, so I will read 6 through 13, and then we'll pick up at the plague that we're going to get to. So Moses and Aaron did so. They did just as the Lord commanded them. Now Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, prove yourselves by working a miracle, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff, cast it down before Pharaoh, that it may become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded. Aaron cast down his staff before Pharaoh and his servants, and it became a serpent. And then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers, and they, magicians of Egypt, also did the same by their secret arts. For each man cast down his staff, and they became serpents, but Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Still Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord had said. So let's look at this and find out what we have here.
And Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83 years old, and when they spoke to Pharaoh. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, show a miracle for yourselves, then you shall say to Aaron, take your rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and let it become a serpent.
All right. So back to the scriptures. Moses did just as God commanded. Now Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. So what do you guys see here? What can you pull out of this?
Well, you know that Aaron was older than Aaron.
Yep, we see that Aaron's older than Moses. How many years? 3. All right. Anybody know anything about Miriam? Where she fit into this? Okay, Miriam was even older than Aaron. She was the first one born. And the daughter of Pharaoh, I read some stuff that said the daughter of Pharaoh hardly would have trusted 2 or 3 or 4 or 5-year-old. You know, remember when she went to the daughter of Pharaoh and said, hey, you know, you found a baby. Right. I know somebody that can nurse him. Everyone says that she was at least 6 years old then, at least 6 or 7. It's not in scripture. We can't pull this out of scripture, but it's extra biblical resources that you can pull this from. So just keep that in mind. You know, back when we was looking at that back in, what was it, Exodus 1? You know, she would have been about 6 years old at least, maybe 7 or 8. Hey.
She had to be old enough to be responsible to go and watch the baby.
Yeah.
And then to communicate to the Egyptian daughter.
Yep. All right.
She maybe would have been a little older than that.
Could be.
Maybe 9.
So Moses was 80 years old when he's standing in front of Pharaoh, and Aaron's 83. And anybody remember what age Moses died at? 120. Good job. All right. And some things I want to bring in here is that in Deuteronomy 34, 5-8, when Moses died, it said in Moses, here, I got this up here. There we go. Nope, that's not. I didn't put it up there. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab, as the Lord had said. He buried him in Moab, in the valley opposite Beth Peor. But to this day, no one knows where his grave is. And Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, and his strength, nor his strength gone. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days until the weeping and the mourning was over. So you see that? Moses died. They mourned 30 days. And then if you go to Joshua 1:11, it says, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, prepare your visions, for in 3 days you are to pass over to Jordan to go and take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So in 3 days, after they were mourning, they crossed the Jordan. This is another picture of them crossing the Red Sea. Remember, they crossed the Red Sea earlier, and then on the same day later, I think it was, they crossed the Jordan and came into the Promised Land. So this is kind of a mirror picture of their exodus. And I believe they probably crossed right there on Passover, and then they were circumcised, and then they kept the second Passover that you read in the scriptures there. All right, so this would have put Moses dying probably in the month of Adar, which is the last month of the year, right before Passover. Passover begins the new year. We're going to find out here in a little bit, okay? So, and rabbinical sources say that he died on the exact day he was born. Interesting.
What?
He died exactly on the day he was born. So he was exactly 120 years old, not 120 and 18 days.
Moses.
Yeah, Moses. All right. Verse 8 and 9, and the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, prove yourself by working a miracle, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff, cast it down before Pharaoh, and it may become a serpent. What do you guys see here?
That's already starting with the miracles.
Mm-hmm. Here's your first miracle. He asked for it, didn't he?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, show me a sign. If you're really from God, prove it. This word miracle is mofet, and it means out of the ordinary. Miracles are something that is out of the ordinary, aren't they? They don't normally happen. That's why they're a miracle. Okay. Signs are pointing you to something that's coming. So Moses tells Aaron what to do, and Aaron, he gives the authority by giving him a staff. So you remember, Aaron's supposed to speak. Moses is supposed to speak to Aaron. So it's like a prophet, okay? So Moses handed the staff to Aaron and tells him what to do, okay? This word before Pharaoh is lifnei, and it means in the face. So they're in the face of Pharaoh, and I don't mean like they're right up next to you like this,
In front of him.
but that's the term that the Bible's using, okay? And it kind of, we can kind of take that and say, yeah, it does kind of mean that under, I'm doing this right in the face of Pharaoh,
Right.
okay? Because he is coming against Pharaoh. And serpent here, what do you guys think about this word serpent? Anybody got anything different?
Where at?
Change the
What verse?
before Pharaoh so that it may become a serpent.
Mine says snake, yeah,
Snake, okay.
It says serpent.
What?
snake.
Okay, that word serpent and snake in the Bible is called Nachash. That's what happened on Mount Sinai when God said, Moses, throw your staff down, and it became a Nachash. Here he's saying throw it down so it can be a Tanin. Tanin is sea monster. That's what it gets translated in Genesis 1:21. So there's something different here with this, what it's going to do. God's showing us something here, okay? It's used, Tanin's used 27 times, but only 3 times in Exodus right here in this chapter, right here. Okay. It's used as a synonym of the monster serpent, which represents the principle of antagonism to light and life. That's by Barnes. And Satan is an antagonist to light and life, isn't he? All right. Because Jesus is the light and life. All right. And then when you translate this to Greek, it's drakon. That's what's used in Revelation 13 times. So anyway, there's something with this word tanin God's wanting us to see. When you throw the stick down, it actually becomes a tanin, not a nachash serpent.
Is it drakon in Hebrew?
That's in Greek.
I'm just saying because there's a similar word in Spanish is dragon, but maybe it's dragon.
And that's what it would translate to, dragon. So anyway, verse 10, would you read that, Inez?
So Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so, just as the Lord commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent.
Okay, here again, it's before the face of Pharaoh, and this word serpent is once again tanin, dragon or monster. Okay,
Mine says staff. Throw down the staff.
Throw down your staff, okay. Throw down your staff or rod, it can be translated either way. So if this was a large cobra, it would be in direct opposition to Pharaoh, because see what he wears on his headdress? A cobra, okay? And this would challenge him,
Yeah.
because that's what he wore. This cobra was a symbol of Uraeus that symbolized sovereignty, royalty, deity, and divine authority. And we know that this thing still still turned into a snake of some sort. So maybe this was a very large snake or something. And we're going to know this because when we go to the blood plague here in the next part, God said that you take that staff that you changed into a serpent and touch the water with it. So we know it changed into a serpent, but God is showing us something here that this is a tanin. It's bigger, badder. And if you think about it, that serpent is going to eat the other serpents, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Anybody who ever watch a serpent eat something?
Yeah, well, no, I watched it, but I was like on TV, I've seen it.
Well, they'll eat a worm. They'll eat a mouse. They'll eat another snake. And they don't do this like a crocodile, okay? Just gobble it up and it's down in 2 seconds. No, a snake eats something and it moves one part of its mouth and then the other part of its mouth, and it takes sometimes an hour, depending on how big this thing is. Can you imagine sitting there and watching this for several hours while this snake ate the rest of the other snakes? No, this tanin was something bigger, badder, more powerful than these snakes. It probably just gobbled them up. I don't know. Because I can't see them sitting around watching this for hours. Okay. Somehow this is picturing Christ.
How did Pharaoh's magicians, or whatever you want to call them, have the power to turn their staff into a snake?
That's a good question, and the Bible even says that they turned it into a tanin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So how did they do that? All right, that's wild, isn't it? All right, so keep in mind too that when the people were bitten by snakes in the wilderness, Jesus told them to put a bronze serpent on a pole and look at it. Okay, so this is picturing Christ somehow. All right, he's the one that conquered the serpent, Satan, when he was lifted up. All right, verse 11, would you read that, Inez?
But Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, so the magicians of Egypt. They also did it like manner with their enchantments.
Okay, all I really want to pull out here is Kakamim is wise studied men, Mekashphim is enchanters, Kartumi is magicians, and Hatihim is secret arts or magic. So verse 12, would you read that, Inez?
For every man threw down his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods.
All right. Here it is. The magicians changed theirs into tanin, not serpents. Okay, so they somehow were magically able to produce these and convince Pharaoh this ain't no big deal. All right, and then the other two, but Aaron's rod or staff swallowed up their rods or staff, is how that's worded. That's Matei. Isn't that wild? So they threw them down and they changed into a tanin, but Aaron's rod ate up their rods. What are rods used for? Power, authority. So this is showing you that Aaron's rod had more power and authority than theirs, even though it was a tanin, a monster or whatever.
It reminds me of what's coming in the end when Satan imitates Christ and,
Yes.
you know, his belief system and all that. He tries to cover up and imitate Christ and claim that he is the one.
That's exactly right.
And that in the end, Jesus will devour him.
Yep. Okay, so the point I want us to take away from this is Aaron's rod was bigger, badder, more powerful than Pharaoh's rod, and they were in his face. And this God, you don't want to mess with, okay? He's bigger, powerful. All right, 13, would you read that, Inez?
And Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them, as the Lord had said.
So Pharaoh's heart was hardened. How did he do that? You harden your own heart, will you? You will not listen to the voice of God.
He had told them before that he was gonna do it.
Yep. Yep. And here it says Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And we know that God says that I will harden his heart, and he also says Pharaoh will harden his heart. So keep that in mind, because that happens both times. This kind of reminds me of Romans 1, 17 to 20. It says the people, will do what they want to do in the end times, knowing that God, I should just read that because I'm messing it up. Let me find out. Romans 1:20. Look at how fast this thing's clicking now. I got a new computer, and this thing is,
Speed of light.
yeah, it's a lot better. All right, let me do the.
And you're blaming it on the internet. Look at you. Shame on you.
All right, Romans 1. Let me read this. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteous men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. That's what Pharaoh's doing. For what can be known of God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. So although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they were futile in their thinking and foolish and their hearts were darkened. That's what Pharaoh doing right there.
You said that's Romans what?
1:20. So God's allowing Pharaoh to exercise his own free will and harden his heart by rejecting the truth God's putting in front of him. All right. God is allowing this to happen because God's not vindictive. He gives everybody chance after chance after chance. Thank God he gave me chance after chance after chance, right? Thank God he still does. All right. Pharaoh here is offered mercy and grace by relaxing the judgments and saying this is going to happen if you don't let my people go, but yet he still rejects it and makes his own free will decisions and hardens his own heart. All right. Now, anybody got anything in what we just read? Wasn't that interesting how God put that tanin in there for some reason? All right, so now we're going to go to the first plague of blood. Let's see what God has for us here. Verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. And God told Pharaoh in the morning, go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to water. Stand on the bank of the Nile to meet him and take your hand in your hand the staff that turned into the serpent. And you shall say to him, the Lord God of Hebrews sent me to you, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But so far you have not obeyed. Thus says the Lord, by this you shall know that I am the Lord. Behold, with the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water in the Nile, and it shall turn into blood. The fish in the Nile shall die, and the Nile will stink, and the Egyptians will grow weary of drinking the water from the Nile. And the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff, stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the rivers, canals, and their ponds, and their pools of water, so that they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, even in the vessels of wood and in the vessels of stone. Moses and Aaron did so, as the Lord commanded, in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants. He lifted up the staff and struck the water in the Nile, and all the water in the Nile turned to blood. And the fish in the Nile died, the Nile stank, so that the Egyptians could not drink water from the Nile. There was blood throughout all the land of Egypt, but the magicians of Egypt did the same thing with their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord said. Pharaoh turned and went in his house, and he did not take even this to heart. And all the Egyptians dug along the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink water of the Nile. 7 days, a full 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. So, Inez, would you read verse 14? Verse 14?
You just got through reading it.
Yeah, I know. I like the way you read it. I'm going to let you read all the singles. I read the whole thing.
So the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refuses to let the people go.
Okay, and this word harden is kazak. It's different than kazak. When Pharaoh turned his heart hard earlier, it was kazak, and that's strong. Remember kazak ve'amatz? Strong and courageous. This one's hard, kaved. So God changed it. Not only is Pharaoh hardening his heart, strong, but he's also his heart is heavy here. That's what God is showing us. Okay, verse 15. Would you read that?
Go to Pharaoh in the morning when he goes out to the water, and you shall stand by the river's bank to meet him, and the rod which was turned to a serpent, you shall take it in your hand.
Okay, so God here is telling us that this rod turned into a nachash, serpent, even though in the previous verses he told us it turned into a tanin. So this was a serpent. But maybe it was a big bad serpent. Maybe it was a serpent, we didn't see before. A python or anaconda, I don't know.
Makes me think that God was trying to get his attention,
That's right. And this is the same rod with the power and authority that he's going to confront Pharaoh with now. Okay, you didn't believe the signs. Now we're going to have some judgment.
Now we can play.
Yeah, now we start the plagues. All right, would you read 16 and 17?
And you shall say to him, the Lord God of the Hebrews has sent me to you, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But indeed, until now you would not hear. Thus says the Lord, by this you shall know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will strike the waters which are in the river with the rod that is in my hand, and they shall be turned to blood.
All right, so we're going to be turning the water to blood here. Do you think this actually turned to blood, like when you cut your finger, or is it something like that?
I thought it was blood.
It does say that, but the reason I'm asking to think about this, look at what it says in some of these other scriptures where it says things turn to blood. In Joel 2:31, it says, then the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Do we really think that the moon was actually turned to blood and was dripping?
No.
I don't think so either. I think this may be an eclipse or something that turned the moon to a color like blood. And, okay, and then if we go to 6:12, it says, when he opened the sixth seal, I looked and behold, there was a great earthquake and the sun became black as sackcloth and the full moon became like blood. So it didn't say it become blood, it could become like blood, and that's referring back to Joel, what I just read. And then if you keep reading in Revelations 8:8, it says the second angel blew his trumpet and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. So we can see right here in Revelation, this play is going to happen again. But is this real blood? I don't know. I think it's something like blood. Okay. God's using it to make a point. Okay.
Scientists say it was algae blood.
Yeah. There's people that want to say that these things were all natural effects, but those algae blooms last a lot longer than 7 days. This blood lasted 7 days.
Right.
think God's trying to tell you something there with 7 days.
That's the day of perfection.
Yeah, and blood, I mean, the algae blooms would have lasted longer than that. Okay, so,
But he is God, so he could turn it, he could change it and say, nope, okay, after 7 days, I'm turning it back.
he could.
So.
Yeah, you're right. Which would be out of the normal, wouldn't it?
Well, a lot of this is out of normal, if you take into consideration.
That's right. That's exactly right. But in these things, if you look at the progression of these things, you can kind of start out and say some of these are just natural occurrences, okay? But I think God is testing our faith by doing that. Are you going to believe what I say, or are you going to try to rationalize it as to some natural occurrence? And I think that's what's going on here, okay? The blood thing. Could it have been algae bloom? It may have. I doubt it. I think this was something even better than that, because not only was it the algae bloom in the Nile, it also went in the vessels and ponds and everything else.
Remember the movie where the Pharaoh's wife is bathing and the pool turns into blood?
Yeah. So there's something else going on there than just a natural occurrence. But I think God's allowing some of these to allow you the choice. Are you going to believe me in faith, or are you going to rationalize it to human understanding?
When he even made reference later that the Egyptians tried to dig new wells or dig into the sand to find clean water.
And why would they do that?
Well, the sand will filter water,
That's right.
but it was still bad, so
Yep.
that tells you that all the water, no matter whether it's in the river or, underground well water, was also bad.
Yep. So you can't even dig a hole in the sand and allow the river to filter through it and clean it up for you. That won't work. All right. So, water is known for giving us what? Life. And what did Pharaoh use it for? Death. Throw little babies in it. Now, this thing that you use for death is going to cause you problems. The Nile was used to water all the crops and the plants and the people, and the Nile represented life. Okay. Now, guess what's going to happen to all the fish?
They're gonna die.
They're going to die. All right. Why? Because you threw all the babies in the water.
Why do you do that? Why do you throw the babies in the water?
He threw the babies in the water because he was afraid that the Israelites were increasing too rapidly and they might side with our enemies and overtake us. So we're going to get rid of all the males so that they will be weaker and they can't overtake us.
Future threat.
Hmm?
Future threat.
Yeah. Yep. So, maybe these babies' bloods were crying out. Remember when God said Abel's blood cries from the ground? And that word, he didn't say Abel's blood, it says Abel's bloods, plural. And I think that's showing you that not only when you kill that person, you also kill his prosperity.
Right.
So all of his children that are in the ground with him. So all the bloods are crying out. And that's what's going on here. Pharaoh's killing off all the future babies of Israel, who some may become prophets, like Moses and Aaron, right? All right. Revelation 16. I'm going to read this again. I read a couple of these. I'm going to read you the whole thing because this plague is going to be reiterated again in Revelation. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like blood of a corpse, and every living thing died that was in the sea. The third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel in charge of the water saying, just are you, O Holy One, who was, and for you brought these judgments. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. Pharaoh deserves this, doesn't he?
Right.
Because of what he did. He killed the babies, he killed the future prophets, and the posterity of the Israelites. He shed the blood, and now you're gonna drink it.
You make your cake and eat it too.
All right, would you read verse 18?
And the fish that are in the river shall die, the river shall stink, and the Egyptians will loathe to drink the water of the river.
All right, so this thing that produces life for you guys, and everybody in people congregate around bodies of water. If you look at the United States, they're all around, the majority of them are all around the ocean, rivers. They provide life. They provide ways of transport and transportation. And that's what happened in Israel. I mean, in Egypt. If you look at a map, it's all green around rivers because everything grows around rivers. And that's where the people congregate.
You know,
It produces life.
it reminds me of Joseph, when the plagues, right, the 7-year plagues came to, you know, that he said to Pharaoh that this was gonna happen. The priest behind him said, or murmured, he's like, you're crazy. He's like, now has given us life for years, you know, so how is that gonna be possible?
And which one was this?
And Joseph, when he tells this Pharaoh that the 7-year plague is coming up,
He's trying.
Did he? I don't remember that.
Dreams.
Oh, when
Pharaoh
he,
had the dreams and
yeah, that he had
they
a
brought
dream about
Joseph
it.
to interpret the dream.
yeah, okay. So he told him his dream, but he didn't understand it. And
Right.
Joseph told him.
Joseph told him that there's gonna be 7 years of famine,
Uh-huh.
and then 7 good years, obviously, and then 7 years of famine after that.
Yep.
And the priest was in the back saying, well, he's crazy. He's like, the now is giving us life. You know, what was he talking about?
Yeah, okay. All right, so, but Pharaoh believed him, and he put him in command, didn't he? All right, so this water that produces life for you and that you trust will now produce death. It's gonna stink, and you won't want to drink it. Okay, 19, will you read that?
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying to Aaron, take your rod and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over their streams, over their rivers, over their ponds, and over their pools of water, that they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout the land of Egypt, both in buckets of wood and pitchers of stone.
All right, you guys see anything here?
We're saying, regardless where you think you can go get a drink, it's gonna be blood.
There you
Whether or
go.
not it's already been bottled years ago or yesterday,
Right.
it's already turned blood.
Wow. Rivers is Nahortam. Canals is Yorehim. Ponds are Agmahim. Anybody know who made these?
God.
Pools of water are Mikveh. Wood is Veba Esim. And stone is Ve'abinim. Guess who made those?
The Egyptians?
Yeah, man. Isn't that weird? God gave us 3 that he made, and they're all gonna be blood, and then he's gonna give you 3 of the stuff you make. You make these pools, these mikvah, these wooden vessels and stone vessels, and they're gonna be blood too. Wow. All right, verse 20.
Which means that even if they had taken water and reserved it, it doesn't matter, it's gonna turn to blood too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not only what's gonna turn to blood is the stuff in the river that he smoked, but also the stuff that you already had, you know, in your vessels and everything are gonna turn to blood. Because you're not gonna go get that vessel and put it in an Nile and get blood, are you? It's gonna be there and it's gonna change the blood too. Wow. So your efforts are gonna be futile.
A little too late.
Effortless.
Inez, would you read 20?
And Moses and Aaron did so, just as the Lord commanded. So he lifted up the rod and struck the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants. And all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood.
All right. Well, I just wanna bring your mind back to this Revelation 16, 3-6 again. It's gonna happen again. Coming up in Revelation. 21, would you read that?
The fish that were in the river died. The river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water of the river. So there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt.
Just like God said, death stinks, doesn't it? That's what sin brought. And Adam. That's what our sin brought. Okay. 22.
Then the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them as the Lord had said.
Okay, so they didn't have to go through this. They could have listened to God, didn't they? And they could have changed the outcome of having all their water turn to blood throughout all land of Egypt.
But, well, again, I remember in the movie that they turned the blood of the Israelis also to blood. Or is that not?
The what to blood?
The Israelis water into blood, the magicians?
I don't know that Israel would have done that over there, because they were on the other side of the river in Goshen. And I know a lot of the other plagues didn't, like darkness and hail and all that stuff didn't affect them. I don't think this did. It may have, but I don't think it did. Why? I don't know. That's interesting to think about, because God does say, drink my blood and eat my flesh. And maybe that was a symbolic way that they still did it and drank it, and it didn't affect them the way it affected the pharaohs. I'm talking off the cuff here, just because something's just making me think about that now that you brought that up. But interesting. That's something I'm gonna look into.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it in the movie, so it could not be right.
Okay. This, yeah, that's interesting. Well, let me just continue on, and I'll think about that this week and see if I can come up with something, because there may be something with that. But the magicians, by their secret arts, showed Pharaoh, hey, I can turn this water into blood too. Well, what do you think they did? They probably put some Tola worms in there or something.
How could you turn water into blood when it's already in blood?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe, yeah, they had it up their sleeve and showed, I don't know. Maybe they took what was out of the Nile and did it. I don't know. That whatever it was, they made Pharaoh believe that they did it, right?
That's what
All
I'm
right.
saying. Maybe the water was over there in the Israelis' camp. It wasn't into blood, and then they just grabbed it and turned it to.
That would make sense.
It would, wouldn't it? All right.
Like, they'd already turned everything to blood here, so how would the Egyptians or magicians be able to turn it into blood? So that would make sense, that they
Yeah.
did oversee or over the Nile or whatever.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff we can think about in that one. All right. So he didn't believe Aaron and Moses, and thus he didn't believe God, did he? All right. So Aaron and Moses are witnessing before Pharaoh. There's two people going to come up in Revelation that's going to be witnessing in the latter days, aren't they? All right. I think that's what's being pictured here. Would you read 23, Inez?
And Pharaoh turned and went into his house. Neither was his heart moved by this.
All right. Pharaoh turned and went in his house. So he's out here by the river, turned and went in his house, and he didn't even consider what's going on.
Mine says palace. He turned and went into his palace.
Palace, okay.
Is that just to symbolize his wealth, his stature?
Actually, I don't know. He would have had a nice house, he is a dignitary, so a king, a pharaoh. So, okay, 7, there it is. Let me look that up. 23. Pharaoh went into his house. Let me see what that word is. Beto. Okay, so that's a form of bait, house. So, yep, it could be palace. It's translated palace here, but house is what bait is. Okay, so he went into his house, and you know, that kind of reminds me of people today. They got the same problem. You want to share God with them, and what do? Turn and walk away.
Yep.
Okay, don't want to hear it.
Right.
Okay, people can't even understand how the whole world can be flooded by a worldwide flood, but yet it's in all of the layers of the fossil record that we have, where God killed everything, and they're laying down by water over a rapid period of time, just quickly. In order to have a fossil preserved, it needs to be buried quickly. If you leave a dead animal out there, it'll rot. It'll be gone in a matter of weeks. Okay? So you have to, in jellyfish, we have jellyfish fossils. Those things just melt away in nothing because there's nothing there.
Right.
The world was flooded with water, and people can't understand how that can happen, but yet there's evidence all over the fossil record, and we want to discount it and say, oh, it didn't happen. It's millions and billions of years old. But you got trees that are straight up and down through there with no roots, no branches, that are in strata that are millions of years old. How does that happen without getting rotten, or woodpecker holes, or termites, or how does that happen? It doesn't.
There's nothing left to eat.
Huh?
Nothing left to eat it.
Yeah, there's nothing left to eat. They got buried
No
quickly.
bacteria, no
Yeah.
nothing.
It got buried quickly. Okay.
That makes me think of what's being pictured here, when Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He turned his eyes away from what was the truth and wouldn't look at it.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what people do today a lot of times. They deny what's the truth, thinking, if I don't look at it, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where today's society is.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
It's part of their desire to control.
Yeah. And I don't want to listen to the truth. Don't confuse me with the truth.
I can make it whatever I want to make it.
Right.
I can't believe a book that's been written 4,000 years ago and copied and recopied and translated by man. It don't say what it said back then. Well, how do you know what it said back then and make that argument if you?
Read it.
Yeah.
How many of you seen this? Two banners out on the corner of the church lot.
To what?
The banners.
The banners out on the corner of the church lot. Have you seen them?
I saw.
I came up here yesterday. Was it yesterday? Somebody cut the wire ties
Really.
on both banners. They just laying on the ground or flopping in the air.
You're there, the wind whipped it.
Those wire ties, I don't care how much pressure is put on them, they don't usually break, but these were cut.
Okay. Well, that's what people do. They don't want, to have the truth out there. They'll cut it. Anyway, pretty sad.
I have a question. You said that Tanin means serpent, and then what else?
Tanin means, it gets translated as monster.
Monster.
Yeah.
And then what's serpent?
Or a sea serpent. Serpent is Nahash. Yeah, that's what it's translated everywhere else, but when it's used as Tanin, it usually gets translated dragon or monster, sea monster, something like that.
So there was such thing as dragons or monsters.
Oh, yeah.
See,
Yeah. Yeah, and we got the Komodo dragon still alive today. I think there were other animals similar like that, a little bigger. And if you look at, who was it, is it George? That, we see him on a horse spearing a dragon underneath the belly of the
dragon.
horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that thing, you know, was what, this tall? Okay. And those are spread out all over the Middle East, in Israel and Jordan and in different places. You can go places and they got these pictures of that. These things really existed. The dinosaurs really existed.
Yeah.
And I believe they even existed after the flood. I think they were killed off by people. You know, what's gonna happen if you hear of a dragon running around downtown? You're gonna have everybody coming out of the woodwork with their guns trying to make the newspaper.
So,
Okay?
Some of them.
okay, I need you to pause right there for just a second. My brain is just full. Okay, so we have, God created man and earth and everything in it, and then we had the dinosaurs, and then we had the dragons. But, I lost my question.
Well, the word dinosaurs didn't come about
How come they're not in the
until
Bible? How come dinosaurs are not mentioned in the Bible?
they are. Turn to Job 38.
Job 38?
Yeah, turn to Job 38.
Goodness gracious, no. I gotta look Job up. Hold on. I always thought that was Job. I did. Is it in the New Testament?
Old Testament.
Old.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 7. What am I looking for?
Let me see here.
Is it 38?
Well, it might be 39. Let me find it. I thought it was in 38. The Behemoth and Leviathan. Do you guys see that anywhere? Oh, here we go, 40. Turn to 40, verse 15.
Yep.
Behold, the behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, the strength is in his loins, and the power in his muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze, and his limbs are like bars of iron. That sounds to me like a dinosaur sauropod, one of those big, you know.
Triceratops?
No, the great big ones had a long tail.
Yeah, great big ones with a long tail, like a cedar, like a trunk. And a lot of our Bibles, like the Schofield Bible, will translate this as elephant or rhinoceros or something. Anybody see a tail on an elephant?
The big one.
It's a little bitty thing.
Right.
It's a little bitty tail. It's not like a cedar. Okay, this only fits a dinosaur. And look at,
Dinosaur T-Rex.
well, I don't know about T-Rex, but where's the other one? Leviathan, where's he at?
On the side of my thing in here, it says Behemoth and Leviathan. 40:15. No one is quite sure what is meant by these two words. The English Bible leaves them untranslated. The behemoth appears to resemble a hippopotamus or elephant. The Leviathan has some features of a crocodile and some of a dragon. In other places, the Bible refers to the Leviathan as either a whale-like creature in Psalms 104:26, or a serpent or a monster of the sea in Isaiah 27:1. God used the Leviathan as a symbol of something powerful and uncontrollable. Job just got the message. You can't take on one of God's fearsome creatures. don't attempt to take on God.
That's right. That's the whole point. He's giving them all these little creatures, and he's even saying, Orion, you know, can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you tell the Pleiades and all this stuff? Can you make the Maserati go the way you want? No, I'm the one that does that. You can't do this. I made them. I made all these creatures. Look at them. And he's using the big ones here now, Behemoth and Leviathan. If you go to Job 41, verse 1, can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make you many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you put him in a leash for your girls? Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. Okay, and you can just keep on going. This is a big creature. What I have pictured in my mind is, you know those old time maps that you got the old ship out there, the pirate ship, and you got that little serpent thing? I think those were real creatures back then, and I think that's what the Leviathan is. That's my opinion, but these were creatures that God made, and he's recognizing these were powerful creatures. You're not going to mess with them. Okay. Good question. They're in the Bible, and there's more. If you go to the apocryphal Daniel, which has 2 extra chapters in it, it's in the Catholic Bible. Daniel actually confronts one of the gods that was a dragon, and they were worshiping it. He says, watch this. He feeds it pitch and tar, and it dies. And he says, there's your God. Okay, but that's in a different context. So let me finish up 2 more verses here. 24, and all the Egyptians dug along the Nile to drink water, for they could not drink the water. We just talked about that earlier. They're digging holes so that the sand will filter the water. And it says 7 days, full days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. So God is showing us something here with these 7, and it's been about 6,000 years. God's whole time span, I think, is 7,000 years. And I think this is a explanation of that. Okay, this could not have been something that was natural if not only did the river turn to blood or red, but also the vessels and all that stuff, and the mikvahs and in the bowls and all that stuff. So this was a sign from God, and a miracle. Okay, and here's something else to consider. How many days did Moses say, let my people go? A what journey? A 3-day journey.
3-day journey.
So you got a 3-day journey, 1 day of offering to the God, and then how much back?
2.
3 days back. How many is that?
5.
7. 3 plus 1 plus 3 is 7. So I think there's a picture here also of you wouldn't let my people go a 3 days journey, which will end up being back in a week of 7. Guess what? You got 7 days worth of blood, because they were going to go and shed blood and do my offering, my sacrifice, which is going to picture Christ. You wouldn't let them do it, so you get the judgment. So anyway, that's God's word. Got a lot of good questions here, so good job.